Hi guys, sorry that video just cut me off. I just have a few more slides that I wanted to talk to you about. One of them being desertification. In arid environments, creating deserts is a possibility for farmers. This typically happens because the area is too dry to keep up with the human need for water. So obviously if you're in an arid or dry environment, you're going to need to bring in more water rather than just the precipitation because you usually don't get enough. So you need to bring in more water to help your plants grow. Anytime that the area is too dry and you can't keep up with the need for water, you have the possibility of going into desertification. This can happen all over the world. However, the most famous example is the Dust Bowl that occurred in the Midwest during the 1930s. What happened is that farmers were doing really well. They moved to the Midwest. They start all these farms. They're doing well. And then they hit a drought. And when they hit that drought, their crops dried up. And because of that, nothing was holding the soil down. So then when they got a windstorm in that area of the country, which is usually common based on their geography, the windstorm came through and picked up all the dust and moved it all over the place. So as you can see, it's not a small windstorm. These windstorms are very large, and it actually moved dust 1,200 miles where they actually saw specks of this dust come down through precipitation in New York. So they took it from like your Kansas, Kentucky area, Oklahoma, and blew it all the way across the country to New York. So it impacted people everywhere. It also required farmers to now move to another area of the country to begin their farm life again because they couldn't replenish the amount of soil that was lost at this time. So they call this event and this area of the country the Dust Bowl. Irrigation is another way that soil degradation can happen. So irrigation and pesticides can improve soil productivity in the short term, but they can pollute soil in the long term. So farmers actually use both these things to help their crops. However, if you do them incorrectly or you do them for too long, they actually can start to pollute the soil. So irrigation is when you provide water to plants other than natural precipitation. So if you lived in an area of the country where water isn't precipitating as often as you need, you have to conduct irrigation. A lot of them have these big fancy networks that they use in order to help water their crops. This happens often. But too much irrigation or poorly timed irrigation can lead to waterlogged crops. So if I were to water my crops the day before a really big rainstorm, right, now the crops are getting way too much water. That can lead to too much water in your crops, typically waterlogging them. The other option is salinization, which is any time that you have irrigation. Most of the time farmers put some salts in their water in order to help the crops grow. And because of that, too much irrigation starts to lead to the crystallizing of these salts in the soil, which is actually harmful. It actually can, through capillary action, bring some of the salt from the ground and lead it up into your soil, which is also can be harmful. And the last one is pesticides. Pesticides can also lead to soil degradation, as you've also read about in our article for this week about the broccoli becoming less nutritious over time. So pesticides, if you didn't know, are chemicals that kill organisms that compete or attack plants that we value. So any kind of crop that we're trying to protect because we need it. We use chemicals to kill organisms near it, which is a pesticide. So pesticides can last in soil for long amounts of time. All right, so just because you spray the pesticide and then rainstorm happens, it doesn't mean your pesticide is gone. It can actually stay there for long amounts of time. And because of that, they can be absorbed into groundwater or they can evaporate into the air. If they're being absorbed into your groundwater, if you are a home that has its own well, right, or a farm that has its own well, and you are now drinking that groundwater, now these pesticides are now entering your body, which can be harmful. Or they can evaporate into the air, which if you're on that farm or nearby and the wind happens to blow a certain way on a certain day, right now you're now breathing in those pesticides as well. So they can be harmful either way. They also can kill organisms that are helpful to the soil. So not all pesticides are specifically targeted to specific organisms. So there are organisms in the soil and nearby that are helpful to plants, kind of like bees, right? Some plants need to be pollinated with bees. Just because you're trying to kill the other organisms that are nearby, now you are also killing the helpful ones, which is hurtful to your plants as well. So as we read, right, spraying pesticides over time is now ruining the soil that your plants are growing in. There just seem to be more and more harmful and less helpful. So I think they're trying to start to find different ways to farm that does not require using pesticides. As you see, there are more harm than they are good. So that's all I have for you today. Make sure that you have these written down somewhere so that you can use them for Thursday and Friday and the different assignments that we have coming up. All right. Thanks, guys, for your attention.